Blog Talk Radio.
Mi chiamo Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut, Neye Ujira Da, Medinde Ujirafo, Kwesi, Sanehem Pata, Akan. Akwamumain Amaruka Tipi Mu Ojirafo, Ojiramain Mu. Greetings to all Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnut people, meaning Africans, black people. Today is Ojira Day, Purification Day. My name is Ojirafo, Kwesi, Sanehem Pata, Akan. Ojirafo, the Akwamu Nation in North America, within Ojiraman, the purified nation, Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnut people in the Western Hemisphere. Yet I say we thank you once again for tuning into the broadcast. We've opened up the chat room. If you have any questions or comments and you'd like to interact in the chat room, you must log in as a user in order to interact. If you have any questions or comments on the phone line, simply hit the number 1 so that we can see that your hand is raised. For those who are new to the broadcast, we have 4 broadcasts on a weekly basis. We have Akan Nanasom, Ancient Authentic Akan Ancestral Religion on Joda Monday nights, where we deal specifically with the Akan expression of ancestral religion, first and foremost because we are Akan, secondly because of the misinformation being propagated regarding Akan ancestral religion, cosmology, culture, ritual practice, and so forth. So we deal with our ancestral origins in ancient Khanit, which is a title of ancient Nubia, where Akan people originated. We migrated from ancient Khanit to the western part of the continent 2,000 years ago after the fall of KAMIT in northern Khanit in Egypt and Nubia. We migrated west, reestablished the Khanit Empire, the Nubian Empire, the Empire of Ghana. Hundreds of years subsequent to that, because of invasions, some of our people migrated further south to the savanna and forest belt regions in West Afuraka, Afuraitkait, the regions of contemporary Cote d'Ivoire and Ivory Coast, Cote d'Ivoire, and the Republic of Ghana, reestablished Akan civilization. And then hundreds of years subsequent to that, some of our people were taken from those regions and forced into North, Central, South America, the Caribbean, and Europe during the Musuo Kessier, the Great Perversity, the enslavement era. And thus we ended up in the Western Hemisphere. However, we maintained our ancestral religious practices. Thus, Akan ancestral religion is called Winti in South America, in Suriname, from the Akan term Huinti. Akan ancestral religion is called Obia in Jamaica, from the Akan term Obai. Akan ancestral religion in the United States is called Hoodoo, from the Akan term Undu, meaning medicine from roots, trees, plant life. It also means to become heavy with the spirit through spirit possession, spirit communication. We find these terms also in ancient Khanit and Kamet. In the Medu, to the hieroglyphs, you find Undu, meaning medicine from roots, trees, plant life. Undu also means to become heavy with the spirit through spirit possession, spirit communication. It is also the term for the offerings we place on the altars to the deities and ancestral spirits, the Undu, the Hoodoo. We also find that a title of ancient Nubia is the Undu land, and the people called the Undu people. So we deal with ancient authentic Akan ancestral religion, which we maintained in our ancestral blood circles, which empowered and guided our ancestresses and ancestors on the best means by which to wage war against the whites and their offspring, massacre them, and force the end of enslavement in the Western Hemisphere by taking up metal armaments as well as chemical and biological warfare, root work being the precedent established in the Western Hemisphere for chemical and biological warfare, that precedent that we have to stand on and build upon today to wage war against our enemies, the whites and their offspring. So that's what we deal with on Joda Monday nights. On our Wukuda Wednesday night, we have Egwa Marketplace, where we showcase Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnut businesses, organizations, and institutions, those who are serving our community in a positive capacity, those who maintain their ancestral religious values in the context of the service to the community. So we showcase those businesses, organizations, and institutions. We also have broadcasts where we deal with the philosophical foundation of economic development rooted in our ancestral religious values. We have thus published OCOM economic development model, which is an approach to economic development, a holistic approach, because it is rooted in our ancestral religious values. On Yalda Thursday night, we have Amain-Sem, Affairs of the Nation, where we deal with Amaniye, nationism, the purification of nationalism, our approach to nation building, restoration rooted in a firm foundation and proper knowledge of what an Oman or a nation is. On the Amain-Sem Affairs of the Nation broadcast, we deal with specific issues confronting us as Afuraitkait people, as an Oman, as a nation, specifically as Ojira Man, the purified Ojira Oman nation, mine in the land of the west, the setting sun. So Ojira Man is the purified nation, Afuraitkait people in the Western Hemisphere. We have a unique approach to addressing our issues because we have a unique approach to expressing ourselves as Afuraitkait people. We recognize what an Oman, a nation is, which is a living, breathing entity governed by specific forces in nature, and we are cells within that organal structure. And therefore, when we interface with one another in a harmonious fashion, in context with the deities that govern that organal structure that we are a part of, then we're engaged in true nation building. When we've been directed by our ancestors and ancestors to coalesce in a specific region here in the West, a specific region of the Earth Mother's body here in the West, to blend ancestral blood circles, interface with the unique expression of the Abosom, the deities, plant life, animal life, mineral life in this region, as well as the Earth Mother divinities in this region. We forged a locative identity based on those interactions, those blending of ancestral blood circles, as well as interfacing with the forces in nature in this region. We forged a unique identity, a unique expression of ancestral culture, religious practice, and so forth. And therefore, our approach to solving our issues is an Amaniye approach, meaning a nationist approach. We deal with nationism, the purification of nationalism, a nationist approach to solving our issues. And in that vein, we, of course, as we put forth this week, we have confirmed June 24th, which is Awusida, a Sunday, June 24th, 13,018, so-called 2018. That is the date of our third annual Ojiraman Afashe, Purified Nation, Afuraitkaini people in the West, our Purified Nation Conference, third annual, where we deal with nation building. From a pure perspective, we deal with Amaniye nationism, the purification of nationalism. So that is our third annual conference on June 24th. We posted a new page on Facebook dealing with that detailed information. We updated our website, the Ojiraman Afashe page, so we will have different presenters dealing with different aspects of the 7 principal values of nation building. We will also have our Egua marketplace vendors throughout the course of the day. It's a free event open to Afuraitkaini people only, of course, as all of our events are. We'll be giving away a free copy of our book, Ojiraman Afashe, Volume 3, which will be released on that day. If you would like to vend at that event, go to the page. The vending application is there. If you would like to place an ad for your business, organization, or institution in our book, then you can do that as well on the page. All of that information is there. So, tonight is Ojira, which means purification. On this broadcast, we don't deal only with the Akan expression of ancestral religion, but Afuraitkait, or African ancestral religion, no matter what form it takes, wherever we exist in the world, on the continent or in the Western Hemisphere, no matter what expression it takes, how ancestral religion impacts every aspect of our lives. Ojira means purification. It also means to celebrate a ceremony of purification. When we deal with ancestral religion, in essence, ancestral religion is defined as the ritual incorporation of divine law and the ritual restoration of divine balance. That means through ritual we incorporate those things, objects, deeds, and entities we need to incorporate in order to harmonize our thoughts, intentions, and actions with divine order, and through ritual, we reject those things, objects, deeds, and entities we need to reject in order to restore balance to our thoughts, intentions, and actions, and thus realign ourselves with divine order. We seek to execute our function in creation while aligning every thought, intention, and action with divine order every moment of every day. That is Afurakani Afuraitkaitnut culture, our ancestral culture. When we make legitimate mistakes, then we engage the ritual process to incorporate divine law and restore divine balance, the expansive and contractive poles of ancestral religion. And once we engage that process, then we can get back on track with executing our function throughout the course of our lives and aligning every thought, every intention, every action in harmony with divine order every moment of every day. Our culture is the divine law or love of order, the acceptance, the divine law, love of order, and the divine rejection, hatred of disorder and its purveyors. The expansive and contractive poles of divine order is Maranechi, divine law, love, because law and love is the same word and concept in our ancestral religious practices and culture. Divine law or love is the expansive pole of order. Divine hate is the contractive pole of order. We incorporate that which is in harmony with divine law, and we reject that which is out of harmony with divine law, divine order, and that which will place us out of harmony with divine order. We accept that which we need to harmonize our thoughts, intentions, and actions with order, and we reject, we repel, we hate, we repulse those things as well as entities, individuals who would otherwise place us out of harmony with divine order. That is divine law, love, and divine hate. And of course, when we talk about divine hate, that's not only actions, intentions, circumstances that are disordered, but also our enemies, the whites and their offspring, no matter what expression they manifest, the white Europeans, white Americans, white Hindus, white Asians, white pseudo-Native Americans, or just Asians who invaded all non-Afurakani, non-Afuraitkait people, are the whites and their offspring, and they incarnate as spirits of disorder without exception. There is no exception to that reality. They are divinely hated by the deities, by the ancestresses and ancestors, by the supreme being. They are the cancer cells in the body of black humanity who only deserve our rejection and extermination without exception. Now, and that's true until they become extinct, till we make them extinct. So when we deal with ODWIRA, we say ODWIRA purification operationalizes Nanasom ancestral religion. Purification operationalizes our practice of ritually incorporating law and ritually restoring balance. So we deal with the purification of concepts, of ritual practice, culture, and so forth in this broadcast. Tonight's topic, Sanehem, the grasshopper, speaking in tongues and ritual spitting in Hoodoo, which is Akan Ancestral Religion in North America, but of course, that same ritual practice we'll find in various expressions of ancestral religion across the board. When we talk about Hoodoo, that is Akan Ancestral Religion in North America. Juju, for example, is the Yoruba Ancestral Religion in North America. Grigri is Bambara Ancestral Religion in North America, and so forth. And of course, we've dealt with that in the Etchi Sign, in our recent Etchi Sign conference, in our books and so forth. We're dealing with ancestral religious reversion, our ancestral religious practices we've maintained in our blood circles here in the Western Hemisphere. So, we want to talk about the nature and function of the Sanehem, the grasshopper, and the ritual function of speaking in tongues and ritual spitting in our ancestral religious practices. Now, Sanehem is the term, and you'll see that we show the Medusa, the hieroglyphs for the grasshopper, Sanehem, in the language of ancient Kemet. We show that in the image that we use for the show tonight. You see an image of an actual grasshopper, Sanehem. You see under that, you'll see the Medusa, the hieroglyphs for that Sanehem, and you'll also see an image from the temple of Ramesu II, relief carving of a Sanehem there. Now, what's interesting about that, first and foremost, this is an animal totem, an ancestral animal totem in the Hoodoo tradition in North America. Insects are small animals. For example, the term for animal in Akan is abwa. You'll also find abwa in ancient Kemet is a term for animal. The term for insect is aboawa. And aboawa just means a small wa, aboa, animal. So insects are small animals, and they manifest as animal totems, or achineboa, animal totems for our people. Different animals carry different energy complexes governed by the different forces in creation. There are fiery animals who have a fiery energy complex, fiery disposition. There are watery animals who carry that cool, watery disposition and so forth. You have a number of different animals that includes insects. They are categorized by the forces in nature that govern them, just like plant life and mineral life, and Afurakani, Afuraitkait, African black human life as well. Depending on what divinity governs us, our energy complexes are categorized by the force in nature that governs our heads and so forth. The same is true of animals, including the aboawa, the insects, the smaller diminutive animals. They carry these same energy complexes and are cataloged according to the deities that govern them. So, the Sanehem, the grasshopper, is simply one of those sacred animal totems. That is a sacred ancestral animal totem in the Hoodoo tradition and various other Afurakani, Afuraitkait ancestral traditions as well. But first we can go back and show thousands of years ago that has always been the case. So first we'll go back to our ancient ancestral cultural expressions and religious expressions in ancient Khanit and Kemet to show, as you can see, first and foremost, from the Medusa, you'll see that the determinative symbol of Sanehem is the grasshopper. So let's go to one of the texts of ancient Kemet. First and foremost, if you look in the different texts when you're talking about the ancestral realm, the region of the ancestral realm called the Sekhet Hetep, or the Sekhet Hetepet, the divine fields of peace and divine fields of offerings and so forth, the region of the ancestral realm where the spiritually cultivated ancestresses and ancestors reside. A portion of that divine field is called the Sekhet Aru, where the divine food and plants are and so forth. But another region of the divine field of peace and offerings and so forth, the ancestral realm, that abundant dwelling, is also called the Sekhet Sanehemu, which means the divine field of grasshoppers. So the grasshopper is a sacred totem, but there's a field of grasshoppers, an abundant region named after that specific totem. Why do we have a field or a region of the ancestral realm, that part of the ancestral realm, the spiritually cultivated ancestresses and ancestors reside? Why is there a field within that structure called the Sekhet Sanehemu, dealing with the divine field of grasshoppers? If we go back to the earliest religious texts in existence, the Meru text, the so-called pyramid text, we get an indication of why that is the case. So in this particular text, you find the Ainsu, the king, Pepi. Once he makes his transition, in the pyramid text, the Meru text is talking about what happens after he makes his transition, and he begins to identify himself with the different divinities operating after their order, after their functioning. He's aligning himself with them and operating in harmony with order just like they are. So we can read a section from this ancient pyramid text, and of course the oldest religious text in existence yet on earth in the world are the pyramid texts, the Meru texts. So after he makes his transition, it's a very long text, but we're just going to read a specific section that's relevant to what we're talking about. So this particular section says, "Hail, Pepi, you sail, you arrive, protected by the great lake. And, of course, when they're talking about sailing, when you look in ancient Kemet, you see the sacred boat or the bark with the Aten, the sun, in the bark, and Ra sitting in the boat of the sun and so forth. Ra is the creator, Ra is the creatress. They use the sun and other stars as physical transmitters of their spiritual energy. The sun is called Aten, male, and Atenit, female, and so forth. But you'll see the sun sailing across the sky in a sacred boat and so forth. So Pepi takes up residence in that sacred bark along with Ra. And so this is what they're talking about when they talk about you sail. So Hail Pepi, you sail, you arrive, protected by the Great Lake. You are endowed with a spirit, with power, with will. Because he lived in harmony with divine order, so once he made his transition, he's endowed with increased power and illumination and so forth. He becomes that kind of spiritually cultivated ancestor who is endowed with increased power and influence so he can direct his descendants who still live on earth. Just like our honored ancestresses and ancestors, when they make their transition, they have the capacity and the responsibility. They're endowed with that kind of increased power so they can assist us on earth with illnesses and direction and so forth. So you're endowed with the spirit, with power, and with will. Your two hands are brought to you. The stride of this Pepi is long, meaning he has a great movement across the world. He has a long stride. He can traverse the sky and traverse the heavens, earth, and spirit realm and so forth, a long stride. This Pepi shines in the east like Ra. He travels in the west like Kepra. This Pepi lives on what Heru, the master of heaven, lives upon. By the command of Heru, the master of heaven, Ra, the creator, purifies this Pepi. He descends on his throne. He takes his paddle. He ferries Ra about in the wide space of heaven, like he's the ferryman of the great boat, helping to direct that sacred divine boat of Ra across. He ferries Ra about in the wide space of heaven, meaning he's an assistant to the creator of the universe. He has that responsibility. A star of gold, the tiara of the bull that gives light, a brother of gold in the vault of heaven. He flies from men living on earth. He belongs not to the earth, now he belongs to the heavenly realm. O deity of the double city, his ka, meaning his soul, is in your two fingers. He pounces upon heaven like the yow bird. He kisses heaven like the hawk. He goes round about heaven like the Sanehem, like the sacred grasshopper. And of course, grasshoppers have not only the capacity to leap very great distances in context of their size and so forth, but they also have wings and they have the capacity to fly. So he goes around about heaven like the great grasshopper. In one text it says like Herakuti. In another text it says like the great grasshopper, the Sanehem. He is not turned back. He's a king. He does not suffer. He does not suffer, and it says does not suffer Bastet. So he's speaking with Bastet and so forth. He does not suffer. If he be the son of Ra, he will make his seat. Pepi has made a seat. If he be the son of Ra, he will be safe. Pepi is safe. So when it's saying he has made his seat because he is like the son of Ra, who's made his seat in the great bark of the sacred boat of the sun and so forth. The son of Ra, he will be safe. And then the text declares he is safe, meaning he is a quote-unquote son of Ra. That means the spirit that he was endowed with, when it says he's been endowed with a spirit, meaning a Ba, that is that divine living energy, a portion of the divine living energy of Ra and Ra'at, the creator and creatress. They give us a portion of their divine living energy, that solar power, that energy dwelling within our spirit bodies that enlivens us, empowers us, gives us the power of animation and movement and fire. It's an energy connection to them. We have a little spirit in our body, which is a portion of the great divine spirit, which is Ra and Ra'at. Ra and Ra'at are the great Ba and the great Bayat, the great divine living energy in creation. They are the spirit or divine living energy within the great divine body of Aminet and Amen, the supreme being, the great mother and great father, supreme being. So just like you have a body, if you're an Afurakani male, your body is like Amen. You are like Amen. If you're an Afuraitkaiti female, you are like Aminet, like the great father and the great mother. The black substance within your body that permeates not only your skin, but also internally your various organs, the apex is in the brain, the neuromelanin in the brain, but that black substance that permeates your entire body internally as well as externally, the melanin and so forth, that is the physical seat of the soul, the Ka'at. But then you also have a divine living energy circulating through you, that divine fire that you can send to the different parts of your body, the divine living energy that animates you, that is your Ba. If you're a male, Bayat. If you're a female, that divine living energy is that portion of Ra and Ra'at, that creative power that moves throughout your body, just like the divine energy of Ra and Ra'at moves within the great divine body of Amen and Aminet. So, earlier in the text when it said he was endowed with the spirit, meaning a Ba, that divine living energy. So when it says here, if he be the son of Ra, Sarah, he will be safe. And then it says, Pepi is safe. That's like a question and answer. If he's the son of Ra, he will be safe. It says, Pepi is safe, meaning he is the son of Ra. If he be the son of Ra, he will make his seat. Then it says, Pepi has made a seat. The answer is saying, because he made a seat, yes, he is the son of Ra. His Ba is living. His Ba is powerful. His Ba has been given to him and rejuvenated by Ra and Ra'at. So that divine living energy within him has been linked to the divine living energy of the Creator and Creatress. Very similar to when you take a deep breath, you draw in air from the atmosphere and you hold that air inside of your lungs. That little pocket of air inside of your lungs that animates you is a little portion of the great air that surrounds the entire atmosphere of the earth. If you open up your mouth and your lungs and your, trachea and so forth, that pocket of air that's in your lungs that animates you is linked directly to the air outside of you that surrounds you and surrounds the entire planet. So there's a direct energetic link from the air in your lungs to the air around in the atmosphere surrounding the planet. The energy, the divine living spirit, the Ba, that solar energy that's within us is directly linked to the solar energy coming from the sun that penetrates and permeates earth and so forth. But the spiritual force within that solar energy is directly linked to the spiritual force that animates the sun and all the various stars. We have a direct energetic link to Ra and Ra'at, the Creator and Creatress. When we live in harmony with them, we can activate that energetic link, and through that energetic link, we can become possessed by Ra and Ra'at and the various deities and so forth, and we can utilize that energy to our best benefit for healing as well as protection and illumination. So this is what the text is talking about. But the key is when it says he goes around heaven and talks about the different divinities he identifies with, but it says he goes around heaven, talking about Pepi. He goes round about heaven like the Sanehem, like the great grasshopper. Now, that's an ancient, the most ancient testimony or attestation to the grasshopper as a sacred animal totem, a divine animal totem that goes back thousands of years. Then we come all the way back to the present, and we find that the Sanehem, or the animal totem, in the Hoodoo tradition, as well as various other Afuraitkait traditions, is an animal totem as well. So there's a difference between when we're talking about Achinebois, or animal totems that carry the energy complex of a specific divinity, as opposed to when you're reading some nonsense or some pseudo-spiritual book or some pseudo-Native American animal totem book or some pseudo-New Age spiritual book talking about if you see the grasshopper, then that means you are leaping forward to a new, manifestation of your life. That's nonsense. When they talk like that, that means they don't know what they're talking about. They don't have a direct relationship to that animal totem. They don't have a relationship to the deities that govern that specific animal. So therefore, they can't communicate with those divinities. They can't be possessed by those divinities. So when they talk about animals showing up, no matter what animal or insect they're talking about, they have no real depth of understanding. But when an animal totem is sent to us by our ancestresses and ancestors, and this carries the energy of a specific divinity that has governed us for thousands of years, it carries that energy complex and stimulates us, allows us to provoke the energy of that divinity through that animal totem so that we can engage in the specific activities that are governed by that deity through that specific animal totem. So what is this grasshopper or the Sanehem dealing with? One of the most obvious and prominent, expressions of the energy of that grasshopper in relationship to spirit communication and communication in general, of course, is the speech of the grasshopper, of the Sanehem. Of course, they are, quote-unquote, singing or communicating. And if you go out at nighttime or even during the daytime and you're in an area, it doesn't have to be heavily, wooded and so forth. And if you stop and just pay attention, you will hear the song or the speech of the Sanehem or Sanehemu plural communicating on a regular basis. One of the things that we on the surface, and actually the only thing on the surface that we had not maintained in the Western Hemisphere, typically, especially in North America with regard to ancestral religion and culture, on the surface, is being able to speak our ancestral language fluently. That's one thing that we had not maintained. Everything else with regard to ancestral religion and culture, we have maintained. When you have ancestral communication, ancestral spirit possession, and deity possession, it is impossible to lose your culture. When someone says we lost our culture and lost the knowledge of our culture, that's pure stupidity. They're operating out of a foolish, Eurocentric mindset. You hear fools who are calling themselves Muslims and Moors and Hebrews and all other stupidity, talking about we lost the culture. You can't lose the culture when you know and communicate with your ancestresses and ancestors, with the Nanano Nsamanfo, the spiritually cultivated ancestresses and ancestors via direct blood circle, because they communicate directly with you. The same Nanano Nsamanfo or Aku Akutu Egungun Kuvita, spiritually cultivated ancestresses and ancestors who founded the culture, and those who continue to practice the culture, they communicate directly with us through spirit possession directly in a communal setting. So, for example, if you forgot a specific ritual dance, if you forgot a specific ritual song, if you forgot a specific ritual prayer or invocation, if you forgot how to prepare specific medicine from certain plant life or mineral life or animal life, the ancestor or ancestress, priest or priestess who engaged those ritual practices in your blood circle from hundreds of years ago or even thousands of years ago, they possess. And once they get into the body of the person, they don't just walk around. They will go over to the specific plant life, pick the plant at the right time of the day, right time of the year, right time of the night, and so forth, and prepare the medicine and show you how to prepare the medicine. And then you watch them, and they will direct you to watch them, and then you relearn how to do that, and you record that information and transmit it to your people. They will engage the ritual song and show you and teach you the ritual song. They will engage that ritual dance. They will engage those ritual invocations and show you that in real time. And then we perpetuate that. We recall that. We record that. It becomes part of the fabric of the culture once again. And then we perpetuate that. It's impossible to lose ancestral religion. And of course, we have an ancestral memory as well of having engaged these ritual practices It's always encoded in our krawa, our soul, divine consciousness. So we've done these things in previous incarnations. We can access those ancestral memories once again. So we can access it from ourselves. We can access it directly from the Nanano Nsamanfo spiritually cultivated ancestresses and ancestors when they possess. And anybody who practices real, authentic ancestral religion in North America has had the experience of the ancestresses and ancestors possessing someone and showing people specific ritual symbols, specific ritual songs, specific ritual dances, specific means by which to prepare ritual medicines, talismans, and so forth. So that's unbroken. Also through spirit communication, through going to the shrine, learning directly from the Nsamanfo. They also utilize the Adai state or the dream state to communicate directly with us and so forth. So you can't lose the knowledge of the culture. As far as ancestral religion and culture is concerned, you can't lose that. That's impossible. So when we talk about ritual song, ritual dance, root work, conjure, ritual invocations, specific ritual clothing, talismans, amulets, ritual sculptures, and so forth, we've maintained all of that, for example, in the Hoodoo tradition. Different expressions of these different things. We've talked about kente cloth, the way we make our quilts and so forth, ancestrally guided, recreating the kente right there, the ritual symbols, for example, Adinkra symbols used in the same fashion as Deves are used in Vodun, and some Deves include Adinkra symbols and so forth. We utilize them as matrices, what the whites and offspring would call sigils, to draw the Nsamanfo and the Abosom down and so forth. And of course, the Abosom, the deities, the Orishas of Vodou, possess us and show us specific ritual invocations for them specifically. They've continued that practice here in North America. We've maintained ritual symbols, maintained the so-called kente in the forms of strip, quilting and so forth. We maintain the akuaba or hoodoo doll babies and so forth. We maintain certain ritual clothing and ritual colors, ritual dances, such as the ring shout and so forth, the same ritual dances we've engaged for hundreds of years and thousands of years. Every aspect of the tradition we've maintained. The only thing we didn't, quote-unquote, maintain on the surface is everyday regular communication in ancestral language, fluent speaking of the ancestral language. That we say on the surface, because the Nanano Nsamanfo, the spiritually cultivated ancestresses and ancestors, still speak the language to us. For example, and in the UBEN-HYENG, as a matter of fact, in the section called Goddess Holds Your Name, God Has Your Language, and that's on page 20. In that specific section, we say near the end, we're talking about the ancestral language coming directly from the divinities, the sound vibrations manifest in nature. We incorporate the energy of the different divinities of the locales that we move into, the nuanced sounds of the forest, the nuanced sounds of riverine areas, the nuanced sounds of desert areas, the nuanced sounds of forest areas, the nuanced sounds, cacophony of sounds coming from animal life as well as mineral life and plant life when we attune of forest areas, savanna areas, and so forth. We take on those nuanced sounds, and that informs the manner in which we speak our primordial, primal language. Sound vibrations reflecting the energy of that specific region and of our clan and so forth. So we talk about that in that specific section. Then we say the ancestral spirits recognize the dialect of the primordial language they spoke. They recognize it when you call their name in their dialect during libation. They recognize it when you provoke dialogue in their dialect through evocation. Their dialect nourishes them, for it is descendant through Afuraka, Afuraitkait, from the primordial God language, which is a tonal language. Then we say later down in that section, you are connected genetically to the ancestral spirits. If the dialect they spoke nourishes and energizes them, that unique configuration of sound vibrations of your dialect of the primordial ancestral language, when you speak it, that unique configuration of sound vibrations projected towards them those sound vibrations stimulate them. If you were in a dark room and then all of a sudden you heard a voice, you start moving towards those sound vibrations. If that voice is speaking the language that you are familiar with, you identify with that and you start moving towards wherever that sound is coming from. And the ancestresses and ancestors of your direct blood circle recognize that most people in the family are not engaged in ancestral religion and they're praying to a fictional cartoon character, deity who never existed, Jesus, Yeshua, and so forth, or the fictional cartoon character, Allah, or these other fictional cartoon characters like Yahweh and so forth. They see some people are spiritually deluded, but then all of a sudden they hear someone playing some drums or pouring libation, and then they hear you speaking an ancestral language that they haven't heard anyone in the family speak for over 100 years. They start moving to the space, the shrine space, where those invocations or evocations are coming from. It nourishes them because those sound vibrations are in harmony with their energy complex, and it nourishes you at the same time. We say if you are connected genetically to the ancestral spirits, if the dialect they spoke nourishes and energizes them, should it not nourish and energize you as their descendant, their incarnation? You have a right and responsibility to employ the dialect that was written in you, the name resonating as you. So we talk about that and we say proper name and language are energetic links to spirit. So that specific, unique configuration of sound vibrations and the specific dialect based on the region of the Earth Mother we went to, migrated to, took up residence in, acclimated ourselves to, became possessed by the unique expression of the divinities of that region that influenced our bodies, our sperm and ovum that will give birth to children and so forth, resonating at the frequency of that region of the Earth Mother and the nuanced sound vibrations emanating from plant life, animal life, mineral life, and so forth, which informed our primal ancestral language. Then we have a unique dialect of our ancestral language, and when we speak that unique dialect, it stimulates the spirit bodies of our ancestresses and ancestors who first spoke that dialect, incorporated it as part of their being. It stimulates us. Those sound vibrations stimulate us because our spirit bodies are configured in a unique fashion. But what happens if you, quote unquote, lose the common knowledge on the surface of the dialect? We go out, we engage ritual practice, and for example, the first time I ever heard the Akan language, the tree language of the Akan people, it was not from communicating with a Ghanaian, an Akan person from Ivory Coast or Ghana. It was at my ancestral shrine. It was at my Nkomre, asking my Nananom Unsaman for what clan we come from. They spoke to me in the language, and they've only spoken in the language, their ancestral language. Once they speak in that ancestral language, then they directed me and urged me and encouraged me to go study the Akan language, the tree language of the Akan people. Not simply so I could learn the language just like someone going to take a language course because it's interesting to learn a language or find out a language, or just simply to communicate in the language. Yes, they want us to communicate in the language. We only communicate with our ancestresses and ancestors in our ancestral language. We do not project the perversity of English or any other European or Eurasian language like Arabic or English or any other language that perverts collection of sound vibrations to our ancestresses and ancestors. They repel that. They attune to our intentions, but they don't deal with that nonsensical, perverse group of sound vibrations manifest as these European and Eurasian languages. So they're not listening to that. They don't want to have anything to do with that. They attune to your intentions, and they drown out that other nonsense. So they do want us to communicate in the language. But the reason they directed me to study Akan ancestral language wasn't first and foremost just to learn to communicate in the language, which also nourishes our spirit bodies, our physical bodies as well. But first and foremost, they wanted me to study the language to confirm what they told me at the shrine, to show the direct continuity of the culture. So when I go and study the language, and it turns out the words and the terms that they spoke directly at the shrine are the terms in the language, proving that this is the Akan language with the proper definitions and so forth. It simply was a confirmation of who we are culturally, who our clan is culturally, and that we're still in communication with our ancestors and ancestors. Then they directed me to look in the language of ancient Khanit and KAMIT and told me that the Akan people come from ancient Khanat or Nubia. Then I'm studying the language of ancient Khanit and KAMIT, Khanat and KAMIT, in comparison with the language of the Akan people and showing that it's the same language. They didn't direct me to do that simply so that it can be an intellectual exercise to prove conclusively the continuity of culture. What they spoke to me at the shrine is the exact same language they've been speaking for thousands of years. It is the Akan language. I'm able to confirm that. The same terms they spoke audibly, that I could hear audibly, and giving me the exact definitions and the imagery associated with the words. Then I look in the Akan language dictionaries and so forth, see those exact same words they spoke with the proper imagery and therefore definitions of what those words are. Then going to the language of ancient KAMIT, seeing the exact same words with the exact same definitions associated with specific divinities and so forth, showing that Hoodoo is Akan Ancestral Religion. Them speaking to me directly, the proof in Akan as well as ancient Khanat, of course, is there because what they're saying to me directly in my own ancestral religious practice is borne out through the languages that still exist and even the ancient ancestral language that even we're reading in the pyramid texts and so forth. The same terms that they spoke at the shrine exist in those texts. So when I'm listening to them at the shrine, then I go and look for those same words, the same definitions in texts that are 5,000 years old, and they exist with the same definitions. That's proof of the continuity of the culture. So first and foremost, they direct us to study the language as proof that they are the same people and what these languages really are. Then secondarily, so that we can communicate in the language and engage in ritual prayer. So that's first and foremost. But in ritual practice and common everyday practice, what took place in the Hoodoo tradition, even before we start engaging in these confirmatory, investigative studies and so forth, just over the past 100+ years, the only portion of the culture that we didn't maintain on the surface, meaning speaking the language fluently, although we still had ritual song, ritual dance, root work, conjure, medicine, and all the other attributes of the culture. On the surface, the language wasn't there, but under the surface, it was there. We talked about spirit communication, spirit possession, them speaking the language at the shrine, but then it also deals with this notion of quote-unquote speaking in tongues. This notion of speaking in tongues has nothing to do with the idiocy of Christianity or the other fake religions like Islam and Judaism and all of that nonsense. Speaking in tongues is something that we've always done. An ancestral spirit possesses, speaks their ancestral language, and that's the quote-unquote speaking in tongues. If an ancestor or ancestress who has not been living on earth for over 300, 400, 500 years or even 1,000 years, their dialect of the ancestral language is an archaic dialect. That is true in North America when ancestral spirits possess or communicate through shrine work and so forth. It's true, for example, in Ghana. You have certain Akan Okomfo priests or priestesses when they possess a specific divinity or ancestral spirit. If it's an ancestral spirit that is from hundreds of years ago, they speak an archaic dialect of the Akan language that's slightly different than the dialect of the Akan language that's spoken today. And people will note the fact that when this particular ancestor or this particular ancestress possesses the dialect of Tree that they speak is an archaic dialect, an ancient dialect of Tree. And some people it's a little bit more difficult to understand because it's more archaic than the regular contemporary expressions of the dialect that they speak every day today. And part of that is because when our people migrated from different areas like the ancient empire of Ghana or migrated from the east and so forth, certain terms were incorporated, certain terms were no longer used on a regular basis. You move away from a desert area, certain terms you're not using on a regular basis. You move into a forest area or savanna region. You incorporate new terms to describe the different environment that you're in and so forth. Certain idioms are different that become popular. So people have to really pay attention when that archaic dialect is spoken, even though they can understand it. That archaic dialect is spoken by that ancestor or ancestors that's, quote unquote, speaking in tongues. They say, oh, well, that ancient ancestor came through, that ancient Nana came through. They're speaking that different tongue, quote unquote, or that different dialect. They're speaking in tongue. The same is true in ancient Khanit and KAMIT. An ancient ancestor or ancestors possessing someone 3,000 years ago, but if that ancestor hadn't lived prior to that for more than 1,000 years, and when they come in, that ancient dialect of the ancient Khaniti language or Kamiti language and so forth that they're speaking is slightly different than that contemporary expression of the dialect that was going on 3,000 years ago. They're speaking a 4,000-year-old dialect to people who are living 3,000 years ago, so it's slightly different. It's archaic. That same thing happened back then. It happens on the continent today. It happens here in North America, as we can confirm. The way we confirm that, of course, when we're talking about speaking in tongues, is when we get possessed. Our ancestresses and ancestors who didn't live here in North America, or they did not, they may have come from the continent, they were enslaved and so forth and brought over here, and they still spoke their ancestral language. They weren't speaking English on a regular basis, or they were forced to speak English. When they make their transition, they still spoke the traditional language that they came with. They speak that language. So when they possess, they speak that language. We've always understood that. We're getting possessed by these ancestresses and ancestors and deities and so forth. They're speaking the ancestral language. Then later on, hundreds of years later, after some of our people over the past 100+ years began to get involved in the pseudo-fake religion of Christianity and start going into the churches, we're bringing the culture and the way of life that we already had, that we've been practicing for thousands of years, including hundreds of years in North America, that Hoodoo tradition. Some of our people migrating into these fake religious sanctuaries, these churches, we still bring that tradition with us. So we're engaged in spirit possession. We're laying hands to heal. We've been doing that for thousands of years. Ritual dance, ritual possession, but also, and of course, drumming and so forth, the kind of things that white Christians are not doing. They see us dancing in a counterclockwise circle, getting possessed, laying hands, healing, and all these different things. They're not accustomed to seeing. But at the same time, and we're bringing this into the church, construct. At the same time, we're also bringing, quote unquote, speaking in tongues. We get possessed by an ancestor or ancestors, just like we did on the plantation, or when we freed ourselves from the plantation and set up our own independent nations. We get possessed by the ancestresses and ancestors. They speak that primordial dialect and so forth, and they communicate with us, and we understand what they're saying. When you communicate with your ancestresses and ancestors and they speak that primordial dialect, you may not know it intellectually, but you know exactly what they're saying, and they also show you the imagery along with the speech to show you exactly what they're talking about, and you know exactly what they're talking about. You understand exactly what they're saying. No different than a baby crying. At some point, the parents understand the nuances of the cry. They know what the baby wants, know what the baby needs as the baby is growing and developing and walking and so forth. Before the baby can talk and speak fluently, they know exactly what the child needs, wants, trying to do, trying to go, where they're trying to go, what they're trying to receive, and so forth. They know. And it's the same thing with us. When they're speaking to us fluently in the language, just like we speak to our children fluently in this language, they begin to understand what we're trying to get them to do, what we're trying to keep them away from. Even before they can speak fully, they know what we're saying. And they're obeying us and so forth. So they do the same thing with us. And we took that into these fake religious sanctuaries, the churches, so when our people got possessed, that speaking in tongues is the same thing we've always been doing. But it goes back also to this ritual invocatory process coming, for example, from the Sanehem. We've talked about in the past, for example, with regard to initiation. When you see people being cut ritually, certain parts of the body, incisions are made and medicine are placed in those incisions. That medicine enters the blood and it creates that energetic link so that the abosome can possess, because your blood carries that medicinal energy. That medicine is connected and resonates at the frequency of the specific divinity that you're initiated to, that governs your head. So then your body becomes a resonant magnetic field for that divinity to take up residence in, and you put that medicine in your body and it's moving through your bloodstream and so forth. So the incision is made, the medicine is placed in the incision. It makes you a greater, more powerful magnet to draw that spirit to you for spirit possession and spirit communication. But that notion of cutting, making an incision, and placing the medicine in, that is a replication ritually of an original process. The first original process is spirit possession. When the spirit head is split and the energy of the deity comes down and descends upon the person and enters into the spiritual disposition of the person. And their energy infuses the body of the person. That is the split, the incision, and the infusion of the energy, or the medicine, quote unquote. The next phase of that ritual process through ritual initiation, cutting or incisions and so forth, and placing the medicine comes directly from the animal totems. So when that sacred animal totem, for example, the bee, comes and stings a person, and the stinger carries that venom that goes into the bloodstream, but that bee as an animal totem for a specific divinity like Afua or Nana Afi, so-called Heteru, Oshun, and so forth, Izuli, where that animal totem is sent by the ancestors and ancestors to come and sting, and then there's an incision made in the body and the venom goes into the bloodstream. That's the original cutting, incision, infusion of medicine as a ritual process. Who was the first priest or priestess in existence? How were they initiated into the priest or priestesshood if there were no priests and priestesses before them to initiate them? It happens through spirit possession, spirit communication, but also sending the animal totems that will come, cut, and send the medicine, the venom into the bloodstream and so forth, and now your body's resonating at a frequency matching that of the divinity. Now you become a greater magnet to pull that divinity in. That's that original priesthood, priestesshood, initiatory process. And then we replicate that process as human beings by making a cut with a sacred knife and so forth, preparing the medicine, quote unquote, the venom, and putting it in the bloodstream just like the animal totem would do that naturally. The same thing is here with the Sanehem. They have that sacred song, that sacred speech. When you go out into nature, you hear them filling up the entire space of creation with their ritual speech and ritual song. And they're rubbing their legs against the forewings and so forth and releasing those sacred sound vibrations and so forth. That is that ritual speech that infuses us with that energy of the abosome that governs them. And then we respond through that ritual speech. We attune to that and we respond through that ritual speech. We get possessed by the divinity. Then they speak through us. We get possessed by the ancestresses and ancestors, and then we speak in tongues as well. That ritual speech is coming through. And then our people understand exactly what the ancestresses and ancestors are saying. So our ancestral language is perpetuated. We never lost the ancestral language in reality. On the surface of every day, just coming into contact with one another and talking on a regular basis, we're not speaking fluently the ancestral language. But when we get into the ritual space, the Nananum Nsamanfo, the spiritually cultivated ancestresses and ancestors, they speak in tongues. They speak that ancestral language. The Abosom, Orisha, Vodou, NTORO to the divinities, they speak in tongues. They speak that ancestral language and they perpetuate that in the community. So the adults as well as the children, they see the spirit possessed and speak that ancestral language. They are hearing their ancestral language. We never stop hearing that. It happens in the communal sphere during a communal ritual. It happens individually when we go to the shrines and they speak directly to us so we can hear it audibly. It happens individually as children as well as adults when we go to sleep and they communicate with us during the adai or the sleep state. But it also happens in nature when they communicate with us through these sacred ancestral totems. Animal totems, the great animal totem, manifest as the Sanehem with that great ritual speech, ritual song, and so forth, those sound vibrations that they fill up the atmosphere with, and we infuse those sound vibrations. We attune to the divinities that govern them, and therefore we can realign ourselves with order. This is what's happening with the Sanehem, with that ritual speech that stimulates us towards that attunement to the ancestral language, speaking in tongues and so forth. But then you also have this notion, so that's healing, that's empowerment, those ritual sound vibrations dealing with healing and empowerment. So that's the expansive aspect of that ritual sound, ritual speech, ritual communication, never leaving our ancestral religious practice. That's the expansive side, the healing, empowerment side. Then you have the contractive side, which deals with protection. You have expansion and contraction. You have the part that you use to infuse yourself, like the ritual incorporation of divine law, infusing yourself with the energy necessary to execute your function in creation, the power and vitality to do so. And then the contractive side is the aspect of protection, immune system, lymphatic system. You utilize what you need to utilize to repel and destroy negative entities, bacteria, viral agents, and so forth physically, as well as negative spiritual entities. And our enemies, of course, the whites and their offspring without exception, physical and non-physical, to repel these negative entities and criminal individuals so we can function harmoniously and maintain what we have built. So the expansive side is that ritual communication carried by that Sanehem, filling up the atmosphere with those ritual sounds, that ritual speaking in tongues, and we attune with that. Then the contractive side, the Sanehem has a ritual function as well. And this is why we talk about this notion of ritual spitting. Some people have learned about this through direct communication and utility with the Sanehem, with the grasshopper. In ancient culture, for example, you have this notion of ritual spitting. In ancient Kemet, you see the fire-spitting cobra, the rearing cobra with the spitting venom and so forth. That venom that's spit out by the cobra attacks the enemy. And then you see Ra and Ra'et and different divinities, Wachet and so forth. They have that rearing cobra, spitting fire and so forth. On the spiritual side, destroying the enemies of Ra and Ra'et and the divinities and the ancestresses and ancestors. So this notion of a spitting cobra and spitting venom and so forth, defending us against our enemies, we've always had that. So spiritually, those totems show up and manifest and we see that. But when we get to North America, that particular animal totem physically doesn't exist in the areas that we live in. There aren't any cobras in Mississippi and Alabama and, in New York, where our people were enslaved there, and Virginia and places like that. So even though spiritually they will show us that at the shrine, spiritually they will show us the ritual, the spitting cobra and so forth, because it's part of one of our animal totems and so forth. But, in the dream state, they will show us that and we recall that and so forth. But the actual physical contact with that particular animal totem, once we got here, we didn't have that contact. However, we have other animal totems that carry that same kind of ritual function. The Sanehem is one of those animal totems. We talked about the Sanehem in the ancient text, the most ancient text. It's included here. So when we see that animal totem here, this is one of those animal totems that's always been part of our ancestral clans, but at the same time, it also exists here in North America, whereas some animal totems that are connected to our clans don't exist in North America. If you're from the Bretuo Abusia or the Bretuo clan in the Akan tradition, for example, the major animal totem is Osebo, which is the leopard, the spotted panther. Of course, you get over here in North America, you're never going to run into a leopard or a spotted panther. But the entity that will carry that same energy is a certain form of cat. So there are certain cats that will show up that still carry that feline energy that's associated and connected with the spotted panther. So here in the Western Hemisphere, the cat carries that energy, and that becomes a sacred animal totem for the people of that particular clan. The same thing when people have an animal totem of a jata, a lion, jata bere, a lioness. We don't see lions and lionesses in North America, but there are certain cats that carry the same energy complex, so they become our living totems here in North America for that same energy complex. We don't have a spitting cobra in North America, so we won't come in contact with them physically, but we do have a physical living animal totem here in North America that Sanehem has a ritual spitting function. Very often, people will call the spitting function of the Sanehem, the grasshopper in North America, they will say the grasshopper spits, quote unquote, tobacco juice. This is because if you capture a grasshopper, or if a grasshopper is startled or feels threatened and so forth, they will spit out a dark brown fluid out of their system. And people say, oh, well, they're spitting tobacco juice because it looks like tobacco juice is very sticky and so forth. It can stain you. It's hard to clean off your hands and so forth if it gets on your hands and so forth. And what they're doing is they're releasing this brown substance to ward off other insects that are predatory and so forth, as well as certain birds and other, rodents and so forth that would be predatory. One of the ways that they escape predators is their great leaping ability. And for example, they will use the example, if we had the same leaping ability that the grasshopper has, the Sanehem has, in proportion, when we see how high they can leap and the distance they can leap, in proportion, if we had the same leaping ability, we would be able to leap from one end of a football field to the other. That's how far and how powerful their leaping ability is. So that's one way they get away from predators. And of course, if you've ever had a grasshopper or even their cousin, a cricket, in your home, for example, leap very high and very far, and it's a little difficult to capture them. It takes a minute to do so. But you can also, attune to them and speak to them, and they'll calm down, and then you can grab a jar, and then you can get them to come into the jar. You close the jar, go through the window, go outside, and let them out. So, but that's one way they escape. Then the other way that they escape, of course, is once they leap, that's the catapult to them getting into the air, and then they begin to fly because they have wings. Of course, they can fly. So that's one way to get away from predators. But another way to get away from predators or to repel predatory animals or other insects is that ritual spitting. Now, we engage that same process. There's a reason why some of our people will be spitting tobacco in the Hoodoo tradition. There's a reason why some of our people would chew on ginger, which is the real Njama Kakaru, as we talked about, Jama Kakaru, which is the title of the real root, or High John the Conqueror, or the High Johnny Conqueror. We showed in our article and our publication and so forth that John the Conqueror, or Johnny Conqueror, is really Njama Kakaru. Kakaru is the name for ginger, and Akan is the root connected to our ancestor whose name was Nyama or Jama, who was forced over here in North America. That's also the name of his sacred plant totem, the Njama plant. Over here, that plant was subsumed under the Kakaru, so his name is Jama. The plant is Kakaru. It became Johnny Conqueror because the whites and offspring called King Jama. In the Caribbean, they called him Johnny, and we go into that whole thing. They corrupted his name from Jama into Johnny, and the Kakaru plant or root became conqueror root or conqueror root. So Jama Kakaru became Johnny Conqueror root or High John the Conqueror root or conqueror root and so forth. But when we chew on the real Kakaru, which is ginger, and then spit it, in the corners of the buildings, we go into court and so forth to protect ourselves, overcome a court case where we spit in the corners of homes to protect ourselves or attack an enemy and so forth, or our people spitting tobacco and so forth. We're not just imitating the whites and their offspring where they're just chewing on some tobacco because it's addictive. We're engaged in ritual practice. We utilize that chewing and spitting for protective purposes. We ritualize that practice. We take the plant life, sometimes inclusive of mineral life and so forth, connect it to a specific divinity, release that energetic frequency through that plant life, sometimes inclusive of mineral life, for our protection, to repel negative individuals, negative entities, negative situations, and so forth. So it's no different than the Sanehem does that. Of course, we understand that with regard, for example, to a skunk. They release, their fluids, and of course, the smell of those fluids are very, very, perverse for most animals, and us as human beings, it's very repulsive and so forth. But it's the same thing with the Sanehem. They release that brown juice. So when some of our people fell into spitting tobacco. Once they left Hoodoo alone, they just ended up spitting tobacco, chewing tobacco, and spitting tobacco and so forth. But originally it wasn't just about that. Originally we're doing the same thing. We're carrying the same energy complex of the Sanehem connected with Ra and Ra'et, as well as Herakuti and so forth. We're engaged in the same process. Just like we're chewing the kakaru, so-called conqueror root, for protection, defense, and so forth. We're doing the same thing with the tobacco once we came over here. We didn't have the tobacco in West Afuraka, Afuraitkait at the time. We come over here and so forth. So we recognize this new plant. We find out what divinities govern the plant and so forth, directly from Asasea-4 and Asasia, the Earth Mother Divinity, bearing Earth Mother Divinity, learning from the Abosom and so forth, and we utilize that plant for ritual protection and so forth. Not just walking around smoking, but utilizing that for ritual protection. Not just sitting around chewing tobacco for days at a time and ruining our teeth and jaws and health and so forth. That's not what we were doing. That corruption comes later. So this is where it's coming from. Then you look at that Sanehem. He has the capacity to fly, and she has the capacity to fly, as it says in the pyramid text, around the heavens in connection with Ra. When Pepi becomes the son of Ra, or Queen Mother becomes the daughter of Ra and Ra'et and so forth, and can traverse the heaven and go around the heaven and so forth, all over creation. They can fly around heaven just like the grasshoppers who become locusts and so forth can fly at great distances and so forth. They can fly around the heavens, meaning they can see everything. They have that vantage point where they can see all. They have the way their eyes are situated. They have a panoramic view. They can see in front. They can see on the sides, and they can see behind them. They have that panoramic view. This is why they're directly related to divination, because they have the capacity to see what is in front of them and what is behind them. Through divination, ADEBISA, we have the capacity to see what is in front of us, what is if they do not change lanes, and how they need to change lanes and so forth. That panoramic view of the Sanehem with the eyes on the body, with that panoramic view, as well as they're flying up in the sky and so forth, and having that vantage point to see what's taking shape below. As an animal totem for Ra and Ra'et and so forth, as well as Herakuti, this is why they're directly connected to divination. When we invoke the divinities and they send that animal totem, and we have examples of that where that animal totem will show up literally and land on the shrine, and their body lies on the shrine and so forth, where the divination is being conducted and so forth, and will direct you in that process. We mummify those bodies, quote unquote, like we did in ancient Kemeto. Instead of quote unquote mummifying the bodies, we dry the bodies out. Those dried out bodies of the insect become an animal totem or crystallized totem for that energy of that animal and so forth, used in a divinatory fashion. We have all of those different things going on. So this is what's happening with the Sanehem on the empowerment side, the expansive side, the energetic side. We're dealing with that notion of that release of sound vibrations and aligns us to our ancestral clans, that ancestral speech that we can hear from our ancestors and ancestors, that those sound vibrations, of course, sound vibrations are powerful. People can sing, and those sound vibrations can break a glass and so forth. We have sound vibrations that are released of our primordial ancestral dialect that stimulates our bodies, physically stimulates our spirit bodies, aligns us with divine order, repels disorder, and so forth. So on one hand, it's that empowerment aspect, that sacred speech, the sound vibrations given off by grasshoppers as well as their cousins, crickets, and so forth. But then on the contractive side, the protection side, what's released from them is that quote-unquote tobacco juice, or that ritual spitting for protection, for defense, and so forth. So all of that is connected to the Sanehem. On the expansive side, on the contractive side, the notion of divination, ADEBISA, the panoramic view from the sky as well as from where they are situated on earth, when they can look all around them and see. So when those animal totems are sent to us spiritually by the ancestors and ancestors for specific forms of communication, but even physically, when they send these animal totems directly to us physically, where they cross our path or enter into our homes, or when we utilize their physical bodies as shrines for specific divinities for divination and so forth, this is what's taking place with the Sanehem, with the grasshopper. So that's the information that we wanted to address in the broadcast. This is the kind of information also that we have incorporated and will be incorporated, number one, in our upcoming film. We are working on that film. This is the particular time frame that we have a little bit more time to try to complete the film. Our AMARUKAFO, ADEBISA, ADWUMADI, African American Ancestral Divination project. We started raising funds for that film in January of last year. So we just eclipsed 1 year of that crowdfunding effort. We have eclipsed the 60% margin. Over the past 6 weeks, we went from 48% to 60%, which was a great leap. Speaking of leaps with regard to Sanehem, but that was a great leap, a 12% leap in 6 weeks. So that was a great jump. For those who have not yet had an opportunity to assist in that effort, we've had about 123 people contribute to our crowdfunding effort for the film. Once we reach that 100%, we'll be able to complete the filming process within about a 30-day period. So if you have not had an opportunity to contribute to that crowdfunding effort, please do so. You can go to our NHOMA page on the website, the publications page on the website. You can go to our fundraiser, fundrazr.com/AMARUKAFO_ADEBISA on our webpage and so forth, our website, regular website. We've had 123 people to contribute. If you have not yet had a chance, please do so today. That will allow us to get this information out. That includes the kind of information we're talking about tonight. These forms of divination we've retained in our blood circles here in North America. We're not dependent on anyone outside of our blood circles for our ancestral religious practice. We're not dependent on traveling to Ghana, Nigeria, Togo, Benin, the Caribbean, anywhere else for our ancestral religious practices. We have maintained them here in North America for hundreds of years since we were forced here. These are the forms of divination that empowered and guided us towards waging war against the whites and their offspring incessantly, to root work and conjure as well, to force the end of enslavement in the Western Hemisphere. This is what we will be addressing in the film. So if you want to see that kind of film, something real, dealing with real super heroes and super het heroes, not fake superheroes like the Panther movie and all of that nonsense, empowering the whites and their offspring for misinformation. We need to be empowering real films, not giving $250 million to crackers in the course of 1 month to see a film about fictional characters and empowering them economically. We need to be empowering our own people to learn about real, true historical individuals our ancestors and ancestors who are the reason why we are walking around free from physical enslavement, because they waged war against the whites and our offspring, powered by their ancestral religious practices, their divinatory practices. That's what our film is about. That's what our children need to know. That's what our adults need to know. So if you've not had a chance to contribute, please contribute to that crowdfunding effort today. And yet I say to those 123 contributors so far, we just look back, for example, over the past few months, we've been averaging about 4,500 downloads of our free books on a monthly basis. So surely we have more than 123 people who are listening and paying attention to the work, downloading 4,500 books a month. So if you've not had a chance to contribute, please do so. We also talked about our ODWIRA conference coming up. If you would like to advertise your business, your organization, your institution in our ODWIRA book, which will be on our website as a free book download permanently. So if you place an ad for your business, your organization, your institution, that ad will be in the free ebook download. But of course, we will have the softcover version as well. It will be released in June on the day of the conference. The physical version will be given away. Copy will be given away to everyone who attends. But then the ebook version and the softcover version will be available on the website. People can purchase the softcover version, but they'll be able to download the ebook version for free permanently. We've had over 3 million hits on our website over the past 12 months. We're averaging about 3 million hits per year over the past couple of years. So when thousands of people are downloading our various books on a monthly basis, you place a $25 ad for your business or a $35 ad for half a page, $25 for one quarter, or $50 for a full page ad. Of course, it's in color. Then from that point on, permanently, anybody who downloads the book will see your ad. It, of course, will pay for itself very quickly. So if you would like to advertise your business, organization, or institution, just go to the ODWIRA Afashe page on our website, and you can advertise your business, organization, or institution. Also, coming up quickly in May, Memorial Day weekend, is our Ka'et Soul of Hoodoo and Voodoo Retreat in Treme, New Orleans. We have a few spaces left for that registration. That is Saturday and Sunday, May 26th, May 27th. We only have about 7.5 weeks left. Myself and Voodoo Queen Kalinda Laveau, we will be conducting those sessions on that weekend retreat. A number of different things that will be happening. That registration will include the books that we will be giving out for the retreat, also vegan food for both days and so forth. So all of the details are on our Ka'et Soul of Hoodoo and Voodoo page on our website. If you would like to attend the retreat, we have a few spaces left for registration. They're first come, first serve, of course. You can go to our page. As soon as those last few spaces are filled, then registration will be closed. And we do anticipate most likely this week we'll be able to close registration for that, because we've had some people say they were planning to register this week and so forth. So if they do that, then the spaces will be filled. So if you would like to register, go directly to the page. They're first come, first serve. So that's the information we wanted to deal with tonight. We want to say thank you for tuning into the broadcast. If you have any questions or comments, just send us an email, post up on Facebook, Kwesi Akan on Facebook, Ojirafo Akan on Facebook. Follow us, Ojirafo on Instagram, Ojirafo on Twitter, Ojirafo on YouTube as well. So once again, we thank you for tuning into this broadcast. And Yebeshi Abio, we will meet again. That's up.